Turn your living room into a joyful, hands-free playroom with CoComelon Sing and Play with JJ. Your child sings, moves, and learns right alongside JJ and friends, all on the big screen. It's designed thoughtfully to spark speech, rhythm, and coordination through songs and active play. Try an ad-free, safe, and interactive way to make screen time part of their learning and growth. Parents love how easy it is, voice-controlled and frustration-free. Kids love every moment of singing, laughing, and playing along. It's fun for them, and it's feel-good for you. Available now in the Volley app on your smart TV. Just search Volley in your TV's app store and start your free trial of CoComelon Sing and Play with JJ today. That's CoComelon Sing and Play with JJ, available now in the Volley app on your smart TV. Search Volley and start your free trial today.
Volley. Welcome to Homeschooling Outside the Box, the podcast that encourages and equips moms who homeschool an outside-the-box child.
Hey there, I'm Cindy Renna, and today I'm talking with Leah Martin, blogger at My Little Robins. Leah, you want to say hello?
Hi.
So I met Leah, in quotations, met through Instagram because I started following her Instagram page, which is wonderful. She puts up the sweetest pictures. And then that sort of led me to your blog. And I found out that you have got little ones, but you also used to be a Charlotte Mason teacher. Is that correct?
Yes, it is at an Ambleside school.
That is wonderful. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and your family and kind of how you found Charlotte Mason, because it wasn't through homeschooling at first.
It wasn't. I was a public school teacher and I was just feeling at the end of my rope. All of the things that we had to do that I felt like weren't actually good for children. And I was 7 or 8 months pregnant with my daughter when I thought, I have got to get out of here. I couldn't imagine educating my child like I was educating other people's children. So I started praying about it and I started putting together a resume. And literally the same week, I met a parent of a former student at the grocery store, and he said, she's at an Ambleside school now, and it is so amazing. I know you're probably not looking for a new job, but if you are, they're hiring and there's an open house tomorrow.
Oh, my goodness.
Isn't that amazing? God answers prayers in awesome ways. And so I dragged my husband to that open house, and when we left, he said, that's how I should have been educated growing up. And at that moment, yeah, we were both sold on Charlotte Mason at that moment. So it's a really neat way to find out about her. And as I learned more about Charlotte Mason, I learned more about the homeschooling community. And after I left teaching to stay home with my kids, I thought, wow, it's really neat to see this implemented at home. So for right now, we're homeschooling and we're really just taking it year by year based on our kids' needs and how it goes and how we're feeling called by the Lord.
That is awesome. Now, okay, you're in Colorado, right?
Yeah. Yes.
So is that where the Ambleside school is?
Yes, there's three or so Ambleside schools in Colorado, but they're nationwide. There's a couple in Texas and Virginia and California. There's even Ambleside schools in South Africa. So they're spreading, and it's wonderful to see Charlotte Mason's philosophy brought back to schools.
That is so incredible. And it's funny because you'll read her volumes and think, oh man, I wish it was, England in the 1910s or something. You think it was like this old thing, but it's actually a thing that's happening even in America and kind of reviving.
Definitely. I think everyone is searching for a way to improve education, and her ideas were timeless. There's really no expiration date on wisdom like that. So it's really neat to see it coming back to schools.
Absolutely. Okay, so you have 3 now, right? Since you were 7 months pregnant, you've since grown your family.
Yes, my youngest is 20, almost 20 months, and my oldest is 6 years.
Wow. Okay, so you are the perfect person for us to be talking to today because I want to share with my listeners today about the early years and what Charlotte Mason meant when she was referring to the early years. What ages is that referring to?
So, in general, she's talking about the years that come before formal lessons, which we consider to be 0 to 6. She said in some cases those formal lessons can start on their sixth birthdays. So the early years are all the years before that.
Okay, and I think in America we're so accustomed to, you kind of have baby and then toddler, and then you're supposed to send them away to preschool. So I love the idea, and that really changed for me the way I looked at my children's development, thinking that it was actually this 6-year span of what does she say, a gentle growing time or a quiet growing time. It's such a
Yeah.
beautiful description. And I was fortunate to find her right as I had our youngest, Gracie. So she'll be 6 in November. So we've been living these early years. And it's been a wonderful thing. And it's such a difference from the way it was with my boys, who I had not found Charlotte Mason. And we were very typical, put them in a little church preschool when they were 2 or 3 years old. And I just thought we'd do that. And then we'd send them to a kindergarten. I had this whole plan lined out. But of course, God's plans are usually different. And so when our oldest was diagnosed with autism at age 3, I thought, oh, this is not this is not working the way I thought it was going to. So I can definitely look back and see where an approach like this would have really, really nurtured him in that time, instead of me trying to, we were just trying to jam, what's the saying, like a square peg into a round hole. And I think even just kids in general, I just see a lot of that happening. They need to read by the time they're 5, or they need to be able to do this academically by the time they're 4. And, preschool is becoming what kindergarten was for us, and kindergarten is now what first grade was for us. So I guess all that in consideration, why do you think it's so important to set aside those early years and resist the pressure from the culture that is screaming at us to start academics earlier and earlier and earlier?
I think for the public schools and their standards that do get pushed earlier, I think that that's a logical point to go through, a logical process to go through, is that early preschool. But if you can remove yourself from those standards and realize these standards are not developmentally appropriate, they were made by lawmakers who don't understand that we're not trying to teach our 2-year-olds how to read, that that's actually not good for them.
Right.
If you can break away from that thinking, then you can realize that you don't need to have that formal preschool of ABCs and 1, 2, 3s. If you notice, preschools will spend all year on the ABCs or all year on counting, because those children, most of them, aren't ready to learn those skills so early on. And it takes a whole lot longer to learn when they aren't ready. But if you wait until they're ready, it's a quick process and it's enjoyable for everybody.
That is such a good point. And I just think a child, when they're naturally motivated, that power of learning, it is just so natural. It's just woven into the fiber of who we are. Children are naturally motivated to learn things and wrestle with ideas. But if we throw it at them too soon, then it's going to backfire.
Yeah, you're right. And that's part of that first principle of children are born persons, where we have to trust that they are eager learners, because people have that natural desire to learn, and so do children. So throwing these like false motivations like stickers and lollipops for learning something doesn't really help them learn. It helps them memorize something for the short term.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so what would you say are some benefits then to waiting? I know we talked about it's just more of a natural process, but do you think there's other benefits?
There are so many, and a lot of them are very physical benefits for a child's body. Teachers are seeing that children can't do simple things like sit in desk chairs because their core muscles haven't been developed if they're not playing. They're not swinging on monkey bars or climbing trees, so their muscles aren't developing, but also their eye muscles are not developing correctly if they're inside staring at things that are close. They're more likely to be nearsighted if they're not getting outside and shifting their point of view from short to long distances. And then even kids who learn how to read at an early age, which I think was about 4, had higher risks of having pretty severe eyesight problems because they were forced to focus on these letters for so long versus go outside and look at things in different perspectives.
That is incredible. I never even thought of that point of view, that it would affect them physically. So you're saying there are things that are not developing in the brain, one, because we're not having them spend their time doing things that they should be doing to develop those areas of the brain. But then the other side of that coin is we're also hindering them by forcing them to do these things that I guess are detrimental to developing.
Yeah, definitely. It's like trying to build a house. We were taking a walk and there was a house being built, and we saw the foundation being laid down. And it didn't look like a house, it just looked like a slab kind of dug under the ground a little bit. And my daughter said, "Why do they start that way? Why can't they just start up top above the ground?" And that made me think of the foundation that we lay when we let our children have a childhood and that quiet growing time, is that they need to have this foundation before they build that top story. You can't just build academics on nothing. There was a program called Teach Your Baby to Read. And the funny thing about that was it is out of business now, but the funny thing about that is reading is highly contextual. You have to know words in order to read. So
Right.
if you're trying to teach your baby to read and they don't have any context, it's really just decoding. You can crack the code and understand what the code says, but you have no idea what the meaning behind that is, and it's completely useless. That's not the point of reading. We read for meaning. So we really have to get those foundational skills in place before we can start building that higher level of academics.
I love that. And I think a big problem that is causing this thinking is there's this false assumption that nothing important is happening during those early years, like that the kids are not doing anything of great value. So let's just hurry up and get to the worthwhile stuff. And
Yeah.
I think there's been this big disconnect because we are seeing it more and more nowadays. It was not, I don't know. I feel like for generations, it was just, mothering. Like that was the time you sort of spent just letting them be little and teaching them things around the house and just sort of bringing them alongside you. And one of my favorite quotes, which I wish I could recite and I just can't. So I'll put it in the show notes. I don't even know what volume it's in, but when Charlotte Mason talks about how the child learns and, from romps with his father and from being, building forts with the couch. And do you know the one I'm talking about?
I think
And
so.
he learns from coming alongside his mother, and he learns about, selflessness from giving into the baby's needs, and, how to be gentle from being with the pets. It's like all these things that are learned in the home and just in a natural home setting. And I think this idea of hurrying up and getting the kids educated has a lot to do with, the home sort of losing its value as a place for learning, how to be a person, so to speak.
Yeah, it's become so segregated, learning and home. And even as a public school teacher, it was so obvious that parents sent their kids to me and kind of had this attitude of like, all right, it's your problem now. Like
Hmm.
my child's education is all your responsibility. Um, and so I think just that thinking has made parents feel like they aren't capable teachers
Hmm.
when I guess if you're thinking of the ABCs, one, two, threes side of things, maybe they aren't. But if we're talking about learning the beauty of the natural surroundings around them and celebrating those things, or um, drawing their attention to some beautiful flower or ladybug, those are ways that we can teach them, even when we're not trying to be the teacher.
Right. Moms say, "Oh, I could never homeschool my kid." And I'd say, "Do you think you can parent her?" And she's like, "Yeah, I do." I said, "Well, were you prepared to do that? How do you know you're qualified to be a parent?"
Yeah.
And the idea is it's no different. It's just you're taking a step up in terms of responsibility. I guess you're adding layers, but it's like you said, that foundation. If you've been mothering for the last 6 years, you can read some books and do some math, and you can add layer by layer by layer over the years. And that's really all homeschool is. And people think it is this vastly different thing, like you said, the segregation, oh, this is a school thing or this is a home thing. And they're not allowing that overlay to happen. And that I think is where it loses its value. Like, oh, I couldn't possibly be doing anything worthwhile with my child as even at age 4 because they're at home. And I love to encourage moms in that and give them that confidence back that you already have all the tools you need to do to do the early years at home.
Yes, definitely. I think all of us want for our children to become lifelong learners. And in order to instill that in them, we also have to be those lifelong learners and understanding that, yeah, we may not have all the answers right now. We may not have everything we need to know about homeschooling when we start out, or um, even a good understanding of math or how to teach math. But you learn those things as you go, and that's part of being a lifelong learner and showing our children that we can continue to learn even when we're adults.
Exactly. I think some of the best advice I got when I started homeschooling, a friend of mine told me, when I had shared some insecurities, she said, "You only have to be 1 week ahead."
Oh
And,
yeah.
that, and that's so true. You really only have to know a week ahead of what they know, in order to prepare them and teach them. So these are things that you're really learning alongside your child in many ways. But let's
Yeah.
talk more about that. If we're not doing academics and we've got this 3, 4, 5, 6-year-old in the home, and you're not going to be focused on teaching them to read, you're not going to be focused on pulling out the math manipulatives yet, what are you doing?
Well, one important thing I think that is kind of a myth in Charlotte Mason circles is that we completely avoid those things during the early years. Like we avoid any kind of reading or any kind of math, but really we follow their lead at this point. Charlotte
Hmm.
Mason said when they want to start reading that we can help them learn their letters. Charlotte Mason said when our little ones show interest in the alphabet, we can go ahead and start teaching them the alphabet. And then when they get a little better at that, they can even start building words. So there are some things that we can do that are interest led. I feel like it's kind of sad to have this idea that some people do that we just don't teach them and they're eager and we're trying to hold them back from
Right.
learning.
You're like, you cannot learn to read yet. Charlotte
Exactly.
Mason said you had to be 6. And I'm like,
It's
right.
so,
But
yeah.
it's more of the I guess it's the attitude of the mom. I'm not going to put on my
Yes.
agenda, Gracie's got to learn how to read this summer. I'm
Yes,
going to
exactly.
wait for those cues and follow her
Yeah.
lead when she's ready.
Exactly. I think that's really important because the whole point is to kindle their desire to learn and not
Right.
to stifle it. Beyond that, the most the majority of our days should be outside with them. We talked about the healthy development of their bodies, also their senses develop healthily. And really, that's what they need to learn in the future is the appropriate use of their senses. They need to be able to listen when they're hearing somebody talk, or to see carefully when they're reading a book or looking at something in science. So all of those senses are really important, and the best place to build them is outside. So Charlotte Mason recommended 4 to 6 hours outside a day for little ones, which sounds overwhelming, but it is possible. For us, this mostly happens in the summer. In the winter, we are very lucky to have an hour outside because
Right.
we're in Colorado, and you could lose a toddler in 18
Yeah.
inches of snow.
Absolutely. So what do you do then? That's a very good point, because we're from Michigan originally. My husband and I grew up in Michigan, and then we moved down to Alabama, and then we moved back to Michigan for 10 months last year with the kids. So while we were there, we had already developed all of these great habits from Alabama, being outdoors for long periods of time, and it did not transfer well. And I found, we could only play out in the snow so much before, noses were turning blue. And so
Sure.
long story short, we ended up back in Alabama, and our outside time is now what it used to be, which is great. But what about the people, like you said, in Colorado or in some of these states where you have long winters, or really even in Alabama? I mean, we don't spend nearly as much time outside in July and August and even September sometimes, unless it's in a pool, because it's so excruciatingly hot. So what are things that you can do when you can't be outside to be nurturing those senses?
I think anything where they can get their bodies moving is really important. Inside, if you can do any kind of gross motor exercise, children just need to get their energy out. And that's one of the awesome parts about being outside for them, is that they can run wild and free and get their energy out. But inside, there are some things that Charlotte Mason mentioned. She mentions object lessons. So that's just really closely looking at something and thinking about the different parts of it. She said that around the dinner table, you can kind of weigh things and tell, like, which is heavier, like a piece of bread or this stick of butter, and kind of get some ideas for how things work and the properties that they're made of. So that's kind of a fun thing to do inside. I kind of take this object lesson idea into sensory bins sometimes. Once I just filled up I don't think they need to be silly sensory bins full of plastic dinosaurs.
Right.
But sometimes I'll just dump noodles into a Tupperware, and they love that. They love playing with the noodles. They're using all their senses to explore, and it's just a good way to keep them exploring and using their senses while we're stuck inside with, illness or a really cold day or something like that. But some other things Charlotte Mason mentioned on that line was along those lines was putting a bunch of objects on a table and having them look at all the objects, and then maybe throwing a blanket over them and having the children recite what they saw. And it's just a neat memory exercise that's kind of fun. So there are ways we can get them observing and using their bodies and senses inside as well.
And I think too, this is so neat, because I've got 2 on the autism spectrum and 1 with ADHD and dyslexia, and almost all of the activities you mentioned have been involved with or suggested by at least one of the therapies we've done.
Oh, wow.
Why is that? You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
why is it that we have this entire generation of children who can't regulate their sensory system? And then here we have Charlotte Mason, who lived a very long time ago, and almost prophetically is telling parents that these are the types of things that children need to do. And I think it was just so much a part of their everyday life. it probably almost went without saying in her day. I mean, these were probably things children were kind of doing anyway, whereas today we have a lot to fight against in terms of they're putting them in school early, or plopping them down in front of the TV or handing them an iPad. There's all these other things competing for attention. The whole idea that we're a very backyard culture now. It's very rare for kids to just be out playing in the street safely, of course. But I grew up playing outside in the street. That's kind of where everybody congregated and all the neighborhood kids would come. And you just don't see that as much anymore. Now, in some communities, they really focus on that. And you do. And thank goodness we live in a community like that. And we really love that about this area. But it's just a very different culture, I think. And so it's almost like we're having to, overcompensate for what should be a natural thing in childhood. And now, because it's so abnormal and kids are not getting these things, now it's to the point where they're not developing certain parts of their brain. And this is a big part of it. This is how we can help them to take care of themselves and their sensory systems. And I mean, of course, there's other things going on, but I just find that very interesting that a lot of these games are right out of a therapy book.
Yeah, that is really interesting. And we just started our journey with sensory processing disorder earlier this year. So we're learning a lot of these things too. And one book I read that I thought was really struck close to home for me was Balanced and Barefoot. Have you ever read that, Cindy?
Oh, no, I haven't. And what's it called? Balanced and Barefoot?
Yes.
Okay.
And I'm going to forget her name right now, but the author is an OT. And so she was writing about the things that she had witnessed during her time as an OT, and this therapy program that she created for kids with sensory issues. And it's basically to get them outside and and to get them climbing. And she said that sometimes starting out, the kids couldn't do the 2-minute walk from the building to like the playground area because they had been so accustomed to being inside and sitting and at desks and watching screens that even something as short as that little walk was difficult and had them huffing and puffing. So
isn't that wild?
It's sad, isn't it?
Yes.
And that's really what children, if you think of childhood, it's a child running around and playing outside, right?
Right. Well, and I think there's something to be said about the freedom of it too. Have you read Last Child in the Woods?
Yes.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so how he's always talking about and I think this goes along with the backyard culture. Okay, we're either in the backyard or we're at a structured activity. We are at a playground that was built specifically for children with a, recycled rubber flooring, in case anybody falls, and or we're at a soccer practice on a team. There's so much structure around children's play nowadays, and that's one thing he really scoffed at. You build different muscles when you're climbing a tree, and there's a lot of playgrounds that are trying to mimic a more natural setting, which is fantastic. But right, I mean, it's ironic. We've kind of come full circle. They're just trying to get them back to doing what kids have always done.
Yeah. And I think the funny thing is it kind of comes into what we were saying earlier is we kind of have this view that children need to be forced to learn, or the parents need to be highly involved in a child's learning by telling them what to do. And it almost seems like that's what's even happening with play. Like you can't go play in the woods, but you can play in this wood-like playground.
Yeah.
So they're creating this environment that's within their terms and kind of fits what they want, their agenda still.
Definitely. So that's thank you for sharing that with us about the sensory processing, because it does seem like all of these sort of overlap into the senses. And so if we devote the first 6 years to helping our children develop these, even if they do have a special need of some sort, I mean, that can only benefit them. And it's probably what your OT wants you to do anyway, right?
Yeah, definitely. She said, play outside. And I said, well, we have that one down, so that's good. And then, she gives us all these movements and to do, and we're basically making these neural connections by just repeating the same movements over and over. And then that's giving him the sensory input, and he's learning how to process that by making those neural connections. And so when our kids are doing that by playing outside, if you watch their play, they often pick repetitive activities. They're digging, they're swinging, they're doing the monkey bars. So naturally, they're often doing that outside without the expensive help of an OT.
Right.
But
Exactly.
so it's neat that they can, they just do that through play without our guidance, without our unnecessary intervention.
Exactly. Okay, so what about the mom who's got older kids who are school age and she's got the preschool age? And by preschool, of course, I mean that 0 to 6. So what do you do when you've got the split and you have to be inside teaching at some point, but then you also are wanting to get those 4 to 6 hours or as much as you can, you want to be dedicating that time to your preschooler getting what they need as well. And let's say you don't have access to a nanny. So which would be so nice, wouldn't it? I wish that was still a thing. So
Yes.
how do you balance that? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I see a lot of people that prioritize the older child's lessons over the younger child's time outdoors. And I don't really think that it has to be a one or the other choice. Charlotte Mason said we can use this standard of never be indoors when you can rightly be without doors.
Uh-huh.
And so I think that you can move lessons outside if it's something easy like a read aloud or a history book that only requires narration. You might need to move in if you're doing some kind of copy work or written narration or something like that. Even that could probably be done outside. Your older children will also benefit from being out there. There's no distraction of screens. They are getting sensory input through wind and maybe the sound of birds chirping as they're writing or reading. So I think that that's okay. I've heard some people say that it's a classroom on its own, so you don't take your lessons out there. But I think that that's not what Charlotte Mason was intending to say, that we can only be outside to observe the outside. I think
Right.
that we can be out there to enjoy it while we're doing other things as well. Otherwise, you mentioned the backyard culture, which is so true, but I like to let my little ones outside sometimes when I'm not out there. And I'm okay with that if you have a safe space for that. Even like designating an area that is their area to go to while you're outside. A lot of people do lessons in the morning and then they have the whole afternoon free to be outside or to go on an adventure somewhere all together. So if you finish lessons by noon, then you might have 4 hours until it's about time to start thinking about dinner to go somewhere. So I think there's definitely ways to do it. We just have to have a little creativity maybe, and maybe just change some of our ideals a little, like, everybody outside together, or rather than just saying like, older kids, no more outside time for you because now you do formal lessons.
Right. And letting each person get what they need and that be okay.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely think that we should also prioritize that outdoor time for younger children instead of just letting those formal lessons supersede them.
That's really that is their formal lessons in a way, because that's what they need to be doing at that time.
Mm-hmm. It's so true. I have a super eager learner, and so when she was about 4 or so, we'd call it nature school, and so we'd go outside for nature school, and that kind of appeased her eagerness to learn, just by clarifying it for her that this is how you do school. This is your school. You're outside, you're observing. And I think that really helped her for a while to see, like, oh, we're not just doing nothing. This is how we do school.
Right, exactly. Because I think that helps with the younger siblings too, because a lot of times if they are an eager learner, they see everybody else doing these very important things, and they want to be a part of it. So explaining it to them in that way, I think is really good. And I know
Yeah.
you came out with an awesome printable that we have been using about, talk to me about the attainments that Charlotte Mason, she had sort of a set of attainments that you wanted to be working on. So this is for the checklist mom like me, who I think it's as important for the mom to feel like you're doing something sometimes as it is for the child, and to kind of give direction. Um, all of these things we mentioned are great things, but they're kind of broad. So if we can narrow in on specifics, then you really feel like you're utilizing that time and getting them ready to start formal lessons when it is time. So what are some of the attainments that Charlotte Mason talked about them getting before formal lessons? And then what did she kind of want to start or wait to start?
So she said these are the attainments for a child of 6. And so I believe what she means is a child who has not yet turned 7. So during their whole 6th year, not just when a child is 6. So I broke this list into the early years things that we should do, and then what we should wait until those formal lessons after 6. And some of the early years things were just beautiful things we can do in nature to recognize 6 birds and their calls. One was to press flowers. How awesome is that? Little kids love to press flowers.
Yes.
And my husband made us these giant wooden flower presses. They were
Oh,
so
I love
awesome.
it.
But they're huge because, they love getting to put things in there and then they open it up. And I also think that's like deferred gratification for them. They have to wait those
Yes.
2 weeks. I know you
Yep.
can press flowers in the microwave, but just the process of having to wait is huge for little children.
Absolutely. And look at all the lessons learned just around that little activity. Or like you said about the birds, and that's one that we're on. Gracie can name all the birds and their colors. We're working on the calls. But look at how many different senses are pulled into that one attainment. It's
Yes.
it's amazing.
Oh, it's so true. It's so fun to bird watch with little ones because they get really
Mm-hmm.
excited and they get excited to share it with me. And I just love that. Like, oh, mom, you have to come see this.
Yes.
And I think that's the best. But another thing we didn't mention, for the early years, we can also introduce foreign language lessons. And that's something she had in that list of formidable attainments, is that they should know some words in a different language. And that's something that we can do outside, point to different parts of nature and say the word in a different language. And I'm not super proficient in French, but I just made a list of French nature words so I could have them on hand and take them outside with me. Otherwise, I'd just forget. So that's something that they can work on when they're little.
That's so easy. And it's even if you don't have the list, think about it. You can just ask your iPhone, how do I say tree in French? And it will tell you. I mean,
It's so
that's
true.
such a fun thing to do with them and to have them hear the accent at such an early age.
It is so true. I know somebody who took voice messages. So on her phone, she recorded herself saying about 10 words. And so then she would just take that outside. And then she'd have the pronunciation and the exact 10 words they were working on.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, it was kind of a smart idea.
Absolutely. So technology, we can use it, definitely.
Yeah, I think so, especially for language, since many of us are not fluent in a foreign language. Technology is a really helpful tool there.
Definitely. Okay, one more question. I'm wondering, you did not mention yet, but I'm assuming it is involved in the early years, is read aloud. So I know Charlotte Mason, this is where her and I sort of split roads a little bit. She was not a huge fan of picture books, but I know she was adamant about reading aloud to children.
Yeah, well, this quote that I think puzzles most people in the Charlotte Mason community, and I think most of us kind of ignore it.
Yeah,
is,
I know the quote you're going to say.
away with She said, away with books and reading too for the first 6 years of life. And most of us are sitting over here scratching our heads because we know with modern research that reading to our children is one of the most important things that we can do during the early years.
Yeah.
But I think there's some reasons that she said this. First of all, in her philosophy, the mental image is always really important. Like having the children
Right.
see what's happening in their mind. And so when we read a story, especially a picture book, we are making that mental image for our children. We're not giving them the room to do that on their own. And that's actually turns out to be a really important literacy tool for older children. Children who are able to put the mental image in their mind have a much higher ability to comprehend what they're reading than children who don't. So for me, that means reading more chapter books earlier instead of just
Right.
always having a picture book, letting them picture what's happening in the chapter book on their own. And sometimes there's a few pictures, but for the most part, they're really having to connect on their own and also follow that longer story for a longer time, which I think is really good for their attention.
Right.
But
And wouldn't you say audiobooks would fit in here too? Or some of we love those Maestro classics where they tell the
oh,
stories through music,
oh
and
yeah.
then they're having that's really working with their auditory skills.
Yeah, definitely. I think, like you said, technology is a great tool right there for audiobooks. And honestly, we do picture books. We just try not to do all picture books. And even for
Sure.
my little guy, he's in a chapter book right now, and he's my middle guy, I guess not little anymore. He's my middle child, but he's 3.5, and we're reading a chapter book with him. So I think there's things that we can do if we're, just to be wise about what we do give them to read. But I
Yeah.
love to read to my children, and especially with my daughter, like kindergarten age, we just had a basket full of books that we would read from every day. And that just kind of gave us some routine for our morning and let her feel like she was doing school and kindergarten when all of her other friends were in kindergarten. So it's good to be intentional about the books that we pick and when we read and all of those things for our very young children.
Definitely. And I always sort of made peace with myself in thinking, well, maybe the picture books in her day were not what they are today. And
Oh,
if you
yeah.
if you can get like a Thomas Locker book, or I mean, some of these really, really well illustrated books, it's really like artwork and a story. So you're almost doing, I've sort of decided that I'm doing picture study and I'm reading aloud. And
Yeah.
and it's worthwhile as long as you're being very selective about both the language that's going in and the things that they're seeing, I think.
Oh, sure. I'm reading Beatrix Potter's biography right now, and they do go a little into the picture books of that time. And I think the goal at that time was to only have beautiful illustrations and not necessarily have any substance. And so they called them pretty books. Sometimes Charlotte Mason
Oh.
referred to pretty books as well. And then on the other hand, there were stories that were only for a moral topic. And
Mhm.
Charlotte Mason also said that we should avoid those where it's the whole point is to spoon feed these moral
Right.
ideas.
Right. Lewis Carroll cracked it those too in Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. And it's funny, when I kind of lined up the timing, I thought, oh, I bet they're talking about maybe some of the same books.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think they really have changed, and now there is a lot of twaddle out there, but you really can
Yes,
find good picture books.
absolutely. Definitely. Okay. Well, Leah, tell me what you are working on. I know you have a lot going on your website. Do you have any new projects you're working on or speaking engagements?
Well, this spring I actually started a podcast as well, with Amy, who blogs at Around the Thicket, um, also an early years blogger. And so that's been a really neat experience. And even just talking to Amy every time is really helpful. It's so important for moms to just talk to other moms about this Charlotte Mason stuff and the homeschool life. And so it's been really neat for me to get to process Charlotte Mason with another person um, often. So that is a great project. And then also, I'm writing a preschool book right now, and hopefully to combine Charlotte Mason's wisdom and words with modern research, which is what I love to do on my blog. So I'm writing that, and it's a little bit slow going because we're also renovating our house right now, which is a project we're working on. But I just really enjoy writing and sharing what I'm learning. And especially, I feel like if the Holy Spirit puts something on my heart, then I have to share it. I feel that that is like a conviction for me that I have to share it because He's given me some idea or something important that's tugging at me. So I'm going to keep going with my writing on my blog and talking on my podcast, and hope that it can resonate with someone out there.
That is wonderful. Well, I'll definitely need to get my hands on that preschool book when it comes out. Do you have a target date yet?
Well, until my house was torn apart this week, it was going to be July. But now that the house is in disarray and my children won't nap with jackhammers going, my time frame is prolonged. But I would like to have it by September, or the beginning of when people are thinking about quote unquote back to school.
Definitely. Well, we'll keep an eye out for that and make sure and post about it when it does come out. Okay, so how can listeners find you online besides, I know your podcast and your blog, but are you on any social media?
Yes, I'm on Instagram at My Little Robins. I'm on Facebook, My Little Robins page, and I also have a group called Charlotte Mason Early Learning, and we just try to talk about Charlotte Mason with a bunch of grace. So new people don't need to feel bad about asking a question and then having the proverbial slap on the hand. And yeah, I'm on Pinterest. I'm everywhere. I'm stretched a little thin sometimes, but
well, it's a good thing. I know you're encouraging a lot of mamas out there. So thank you so much for talking with me.
Thank you, Cindy. It was great to talk with you.
Thanks so much for listening to Homeschooling Outside the Box. If you are loving the show, please consider heading over to iTunes and leaving a review. This is a really great way to help other moms find out about the show so they can be encouraged and equipped just like you are. For more encouragement for yourself, head over to cindyrenna.com. I've got blog posts on there. You can listen to past episodes of the podcast, and there's even a shop if you're looking for something to help equip you more in your homeschool. Things like book lists and a nature journal and all sorts of fun stuff. So thanks again for listening, and I will talk with you soon. Bye-bye.